Welcome to the free skate for February of the Patreon NHL Ice Guys, Monday, February the 24th, and this is the free skate edition for this month, and we decided on to do it, and thanks to Alex, he's the one that suggested it, doing it on Trade Deadline Day, and it is, of course, an exciting day, a busy day. Actually, in recent past years, it's been a dull day at times, Trade Deadline Day, where we've had no trade action whatsoever for the first several hours, and even not all that much in the hour or two leading up to the deadline. And it ends up being a big-time bore, a big-time snore fest, a big-time disappointment in terms of the activity. Not so much this year. It's been a steady flow of trades, not all of them blockbusters, but you've had some great, interesting moves, teams making that push for the playoffs, trying to strengthen their positions, trying to add some offense with some of these teams in the forward group, like a Pittsburgh has, like a New York Islanders have, teams looking at defensive help like the Calgary Flames have, teams that are selling pieces, New Jersey, Chicago, teams like that. So there's a category for every team in the National Hockey League when it comes to Trade Deadline Day. So an exciting day. The deadline is just passed. Obviously, it was at 3 p.m. Eastern, so we're 12 minutes past the deadline. But there will be some trades flooding in over the next 30 to 45 minutes, maybe even an hour, that get announced for the first time even after the deadline, because the trade call has to go through, and we end up getting those trades announced after the deadline. So if we have any late-breaking trades that are announced essentially within the next hour while we're on the air, we'll be on the air till about 4 p.m. Eastern time. We will definitely announce them right here on the show. I will wait to give my thoughts. I'm going to give the floor first to Alex and Andrew here, see their initial thoughts, just overall, at a glance, overall type perspective on what we've seen here on Trade Deadline Day so far. Then we'll talk about specific trades. And we're going to only talk about the bigger ones specifically. We're not going to break down Calle Rosen for Michael Hutchinson. We're going to look at the big trades, the real impact trades that have impacted teams here on Trade Deadline, and how it's going to impact the teams from a betting perspective. Bob McKenzie's not going to tell you if the Islanders are more of a bet on or bet against team or more of an over or under team moving forward with their trades. Same with Pittsburgh, Washington, Boston, any team that's made deals to enhance their team. That's where we come in. We're going to talk about how these trades not only impact the teams on the ice, but how we can approach these teams from a betting perspective and a betting standpoint after the deals that they've made here on this Trade Deadline Day. All right, Alex, let's turn it to you first. Thoughts on what you've seen so far just overall on Trade Deadline Day?
I mean, yeah, like I said, one of the crazier deadline days we've seen in a while, where a lot of trades happen, rapid fire. And it's kind of funny. You mentioned, not the big trade of a small trade of Hutchinson for Calle Rosen. It's actually really a big trade, and it's because of a lot of other things that happened. We were talking about it off air with looking at the New York Rangers, unfortunate incident last night where Igor Shesterkin, their goalie, and Buchnevich both were mildly injured in a car accident. That, we talked about how the Rangers have these three goalies. Well, now they have two. They couldn't move Georgiev or Lundqvist, which means all the teams that needed goalies, like Carolina, like Colorado, weren't able to get one. Colorado had to settle for Michael Hutchinson. So little things like that. And I mean, obviously, you would never expect something outside of the game to affect the trade deadline, affect teams. But, life happens. And so it's interesting now that it's a real domino effect with not just that particular move, but other teams that we thought would be making more moves, like my Hawks, for example, made a couple things late, but not exactly the complete fire sale that a lot of people predicted. So just a very unpredictable day, like I said, as opposed to a couple years ago, where it's just really kind of trades we knew were coming and they finally happened. And, just kind of a slow moving. I expect that, like I said, here at least 3 or 4 more giant deals coming in. Especially one here talking about Zach Parise possibly getting swapped straight up for Andrew Ladd going to the Islanders. So that's something that was kind of been rumored around the last 2-3 hours, but haven't heard any more traction on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the New York Rangers are an interesting team to talk about, and you brought them up. They're 14-6 in their last 20 games. And the moment this morning, of course, it was around 10:30, 11 a.m. Eastern, it was reported Chris Kreider long-term extension, 7 years, $44 million with the Rangers. As soon as that extension got made and they got the deal done, that's proof that they're out of the seller's market, the New York Rangers. They're looking at being a buyer. They're looking at trying to make a push for the postseason, a Rangers team that has pulled themselves really now to just 4 points out of a playoff spot. So the New York Rangers feel they can get in, and certainly their play in their last 20 games has warranted that belief. Their offense has been great all year. It's been good lately, but of course they've gotten the backbone of this team has been their goaltending has been much improved during this 20-game stretch. A lot of that due to Igor Shesterkin. So because Shesterkin's involved in that car accident with Buchnevich, it looks like Buchnevich is the guy that got out of that car accident more unscathed in terms of serious injury.
Right.
He was practicing today. He looks like he's going to be fine. He was on the ice today. Shesterkin, not so much. I mean, he's going to be out for at least a couple of weeks with the rib fracture, and it's going to be out now basically for 2 weeks. And so what that meant is the Rangers, who've been talking about peddling one or one of either Lundqvist or Georgiev at the trade deadline, the other two goalies on this roster, they got to keep both, especially Georgiev, because he's the better, younger goalie. He's played well, and now you're going to see a situation where they got to keep Georgiev, and he's going to have to play these next 2 weeks, because a bad 2 weeks without Shesterkin, and you're right back out of the playoff race again for a team that's committed themselves to making a run at the postseason. So it's changed everything.
And making things more interesting now, you got Brady Shea getting moved to Carolina.
Yes.
Now for a first-round pick coming back to the Rangers. So, like you said, now not only are you down your hot goalie, but a key piece of that blue line now being moved to Carolina, which that's a huge move now because Carolina adding Vatanen and Shea to that blue line. They're, like I said, you talked about earlier, the Metro Division really gearing up for, like I said, it's an arms race now with all those teams trying to, you got about 10 points separating top from sixth place. So everything's just been really wild within those 6 teams.
Yeah, we talk about how the bottom of the Atlantic Division is watered down. That's not the case in the Metropolitan Division this season. That division is loaded, and everybody's improved. We'll get to the specifics in just a moment. But yeah, some breaking trades. We'll mention them as Alex is on top of that with Brady Shea moved to Carolina, Vatanen into the Carolina Hurricanes. Whispers Carolina was exploring Jonathan Quick before the trade deadline as well. So I don't know if Quick is going to end up in Carolina, but there were talks with the Hurricanes and the Kings regarding Jonathan Quick. And for those of you that, I'm sure most of you know it, but if you don't by any chance, both Carolina goalies getting hurt Saturday. And for James Reimer, he's out long term. He's not coming back anytime soon. Mrazek is more day-to-day, week-to-week, but the nature of his injury is one of those unpredictable type of injuries where he could be back in a week, he could be out another month. It's very, very there's a big gap and a wide variance in terms of the length of absence that could be awaiting Peter Mrazek. So you're down 2 goalies. That's why they called up both of their AHL goalies following the miraculous miracle night for David Ayers, the emergency goalie against Toronto. And of course, Brett Pesce, one of their best defensemen gets injured in that game, and he's done for the season. And that's already a Carolina team that was without Dougie Hamilton on the blue line, who's been out for a very long time. So they simply had to address the blue line. They just had to. And Carolina has done that with these last couple trades, Shea and Vatanen, in the last half an hour, obtaining both of them. So very good moves and sensible moves, in my opinion. By the way, Joe Thornton, we can put to rest any word that he's on the move. He is not going anywhere. Confirmation that he has remained a San Jose Shark following the trade deadline. So the Joe Thornton, not going anywhere. There was rumblings he'd go back to Boston. There was some talk Dallas Stars might have been a team that obtained Joe Thornton before this deadline. None of that comes to fruition. Joe Thornton will end the season as a member of the San Jose Sharks, so he's not going anywhere, staying put with San Jose. What else have we got here? It looks like Barclay Goodrow. Again, San Jose Sharks, another team that is selling at the trade deadline. Barclay Goodrow off to the Tampa Bay Lightning. So Tampa Bay, look at the moves they've made. And that's a good depth forward. Barclay Goodrow had a nice season for San Jose. He's one of the depth forwards that's actually stepped up and had a nice season for them. It's looking more and more like let me just hear in. I just want to make sure I just want to make sure this is a confirmed trade, not a rumor, because there's this one set. Let's see, to hearing a high draft pick, possibly first part of. Yeah, it looks like it's a done deal. San Jose to Tampa Bay, Barclay Goodrow. And you look at Tampa Bay now all of a sudden. What's the common thread, Alex? And we'll get Andrew in on this as well. What's the common thread with all these guys they picked up at the deadline? Coleman and gritty players with a little sandpaper to them. Goodrow, all of these players on the blue line. Bogosian, I don't know how much of an impact Bogosian's going to make, but he's got that physical, tough, gritty element to him. Pushed around by Columbus in the first round sweep last year. They try to get by on skill and speed and talent and ability alone without any sort of physical pushback. And we're finding out in the playoffs the last couple of years, St. Louis, the blueprint last year of it, winning the Stanley Cup, got to have some kind of physical presence on your team. You have to. You can't get through 4 tough rounds of playoff hockey, maybe as many as 28 games, without any kind of physical component to your team. And Tampa Bay is finding that out. They're addressing it with not only guys that can play, but they've got the physical, gritty, sandpaper, will hit somebody element to them. Tampa Bay Lightning, you got to give Brisebois a lot of credit, the GM of the Lightning. He's done a nice job this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you mentioned, even going back to the 2015, the final, they played against the Hawks. Hawks, a team that's not really tough at all, but they were able to, like I said, bully them around enough to win that series. That's something that you need. You have to have that balance. You said, especially in the Eastern Conference, you're in the Atlantic, you're playing the Boston's. So we talked about the Metro, the grit that Washington has, even Pittsburgh. They like to play flashy up and down, but they like to hit and get dirty in the corners when needed, and that's the time of a year when that happens. So, like I said, kudos to Tampa Bay for making those moves. And Goodrow's a guy who has increased his point totals every year. He's got 8 goals and 16 assists already. So he, like I say, he can help scoring as well. He's not just a bruiser guy, but he can move it around and actually contribute on the score sheet as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And just as we continue to look at what we're going to have flooding in, nothing yet. We'll continue to look. We'll continue to monitor, see if there's any trades that become announced before or after the trade deadline, but they're made official following the deadline. Let's look back on some of the things that have happened earlier today. I actually want to start with the Edmonton Oilers here in terms of just teams that they've done or things that they've done here tonight today on trade deadline day. There's been some talk that their third and fourth lines didn't have a lot of punch to them. They didn't really do a phenomenal job at addressing the bottom of their forward group. Who's going to give Connor McDavid help is something we have heard for years now regarding the Edmonton Oilers. He needs a little bit more depth on this forward group. Well, I got to give Ken Holland a lot of credit, GM of the Edmonton Oilers. What he did is he went out there and he said, let's get more speed on this team. And he did that with Andreas Athanasiou, who's not had a great season in Detroit. But how many times have we seen this? You can't just say the guy's not got it anymore just because he's having a bad season. This is a talented player, Athanasiou, who's got incredible speed, who's one of the faster skaters in the National Hockey League. Give him an opportunity to get out of a brutal situation in Detroit, go to Edmonton, probably play alongside Connor McDavid, in Edmonton. Have a very good chance to do that because he's one of the few guys with the speed to keep up with the guy like Connor McDavid. And watch him just have his energy level's going to be higher. Adrenaline's going to be flowing now when it's not when you're playing for a really bad hockey team like he was with Detroit. And watch him really start to flourish now that he's a member of the Edmonton Oilers. That's a good pickup. They get Tyler Ennis for forward depth. So I really like that Ken Holland's addressed one of the issues for the Edmonton Oilers, and that's their depth in terms of their forward group. They get Mike Green as well, a veteran defenseman. I know Mike Green, you could say his best days are behind him for sure, but it's a guy that's been in playoff wars for years with multiple teams and a guy that can still help you as long as he can stay healthy. We know injuries have been a problem for Mike Green the last few years, but if you're giving me thumbs up, thumbs down, there's no doubt Edmonton's getting a thumbs up from me with some of the moves. Again, none of them earth-shattering, but Athanasiou is a good move. He can play in your top 6. Tyler Ennis is a guy that gives you more depth and scoring punch from your bottom 6, and a veteran defenseman in Mike Green who is going to help you in playoff time when you need some of that veteran savvy. You need some of that a little bit more experience on that. That's the one thing about the Oilers. Not a lot of playoff experience on this roster. It's where Mike Green can come in and help you on that regard. So thumbs up from me for Ken Holland and the Oilers. Alex, what's your thoughts on what Edmonton did today?
No, I agree. Like I said, just a ton of solid players to add to that lineup. And like I said, this is a division that has made a lot of moves, obviously, as well. We talked about the Metro, but the specific division, I was just reading now about Louis Domingue now getting moved to Vancouver from New Jersey. So Vancouver adding to their goalie depth. But like I said, to have a player like Ennis added, we talk about how it's the Connor McDavid show in Edmonton, but now to add those pieces, not only like I said, to have playoff experience, but just guys who can kind of hang around with him and add to the score sheet. It's probably the best lineup they had since a couple of years ago when they were in the playoffs. And they had a lot of different talent around them. They, were able to, struggle in that series, obviously. But like I said, getting that experience there is huge, especially depending on how things shake out, where they end up, who they end up playing in the first round.
All right, Andrew. By the way, his video's out, but he's still there. Thanks for letting me know, Andrew. I was got to get you back into the show. Then I didn't realize that you're still there. Andrew, your thoughts here on the Oilers? I thought it was a good day for them. How about you?
100% a great day for the Oilers, and this is one of those things a lot of people like to talk about the trade deadline. You're looking for the big splash, the big free agent, but to me, the trade deadline is more so about moves like what the Edmonton Oilers did. The average fan wants to see Chris Kreider go to somewhere, or the Joe Thornton of the world get moved somewhere, the big household names, right? But I think what Edmonton did is pretty much what we've been talking about all season long on this show, is that they had to expand on their secondary scoring, and it's really what they did moving forward here. I really do feel like, guys, at the trade deadline, the third and second line are the two lines that get impacted the most. And we'll get into that with a few other teams like Boston with Richie, but I think Ennis will be a great scorer. Athanasiou will be great. I mean, picking him up from Detroit could use all the the picks that they could get. I mean, they're just in the middle of the massive rebuild. You might as well put him on a better team, and that's just more goal scoring. If I'm Connor McDavid right now, I'm sitting back and I'm smiling because he just came back from injury last night, scored another ridiculous goal. I mean, that is just unbelievable. His hands are so ridiculous. Now, adding more guys that can score for them, if they can get some consistency at the goaltending position and, get some, healthy defensemen and stay strong in the blue line, this is a team that I'm looking to bet on for the rest of the season here at pretty fair prices. So, the trade deadline is very interesting because, you see sometimes it'll be the smallest little player that'll make the biggest impact on a team. And I feel like for this Edmonton Oilers team, they did exactly what they had to do to, make their team better for the second half.
All right, we all like what Edmonton did for sure today. Pittsburgh Penguins, talking about them now a little bit in the Eastern Conference. Another team that was
Jake Muzzin just signed with the Leafs here for a 4-year
extension.
4-year extension. Not surprising at all. They wanted to get him done. He's one of the few guys with a little defensive-minded physical presence on that blue line. There's not many that they like the way he's played overall. He's had rough nights like everybody has on that Leaf defense, but he's had more good nights than bad nights. He's one of the few guys that gives them an element the others blue liners don't have on that Toronto team. So I had a sense that extension was going to get done, and it indeed has. Pittsburgh Penguins, another team that's been busy today when you look at the moves they've made so far today. You get Connor Sheary, an old friend, back. A guy that played with the Penguins and played on a line with Sidney Crosby much of his time in Pittsburgh before. Not his finest season, obviously, when you look at how things have gone for him as a member of the Buffalo Sabres, but kind of like Athanasiou in that regard. It's been a tough season for the Sabres overall. 9 goals, 10 assists is not the kind of season Connor Sheary was expecting. But now back in Pittsburgh, guess where he played his best hockey? In Pittsburgh with Sidney Crosby. So you got to believe, going back there, I know this season you think, why would you want a 19-point guy on your team when you're trying to make a push for the playoffs? A guy that's disappointed that much offensively. Well, you got to believe maybe playing with Crosby again is going to get him going. You can. I almost think some nights you could put me with Sidney Crosby. I could even find my way to a point or two in a game on most nights. But so that's why I think that this trade's going to work for them. I can't figure out what Buffalo's doing. I'm going to bring them into this because they were involved in this other end of the deal. So they've put themselves in that no zone, no man's land, as I like to say, where they're not fully back in the playoff race yet, but they're not completely out of it. They're 6 points back. They are playing pretty well right now. They beat Winnipeg yesterday. So they obtain and acquire Wayne Simmons from New Jersey, and you'd think, wow, Sabres really are maybe going to be buyers here. And then you make this move. You get Sheary traded to Pittsburgh, and you do get Dominic Cahoon coming back the other way. And there's a lot of people saying that with the way Cahoon's played in Pittsburgh this season, that still could be a sign that, hey, Buffalo's trying to make this team better, to make a outside chance push for a playoff race. But it's kind of interesting that, they've made some moves that speak to them being a buyer, some moves that speak to them being a seller. So I don't even know if Jason Botterill knows what he wants to do, the general manager right now of the Sabres team. So it's been a little bit up and down for them, but I like what the Penguins have done. And Patrick Marleau, I know, of course, his best years are behind him. He's not exactly had a great season in San Jose, but, traded to San Jose to maybe win a Stanley Cup, that elusive Stanley Cup, or traded to Pittsburgh, I should say, to get maybe that elusive Stanley Cup. That should spark him quite a bit, and he's still a veteran guy that's been in playoff wars before, can help, can still slot him in as he's not a top 6 forward anymore, but can be a depth forward for this Penguins team. You just look at the moves they've got and this forward group with the additions they've made today. Man alive. I mean, you look at it with Marleau, Sheary back on board. They can move Jared McCann now back to his regular center spot. Zucker, that they added him last week. This is now suddenly a loaded for bear forward group for the Pittsburgh Penguins. 3-4 strong, deep, talented lines. Another team that I've got to give the thumbs up to, Penguins, who have had a really good run the last month. I think they made their team better today as well. Alex, what's your initial take on the moves by the Penguins today?
Yeah, like I said, I like both. Well, all three moved all together. The guys that they brought in with Rodriguez and Sheary. Like I said, Sheary played his best hockey there. Not only is he a guy who does have a great scoring touch, but he also, like I said, has that grit about him. He's a guy he works hard, and that's something that they need moving forward, especially because of the fact that we talked about how beat up and injured this Pittsburgh team has been all year. So depth is of the utmost importance for Pittsburgh. And even looking at Marleau, a guy said his best days are behind him, but he's still every now and then, and like I said, if you put him on a line with, with Crosby, obviously, we might see him have a couple of flashes of brilliance again. And it's always good for teams. You look back over the years, like with Mark Recchi when he ended his career in Boston, Kimmo Timonen that last year when he was with the Hawks, that having that guy chasing a cup, sometimes that really sparks the team in the locker room as well. So adding that piece as well. I mean, there's already a franchise that is used to winning, obviously, but it never hurts rather to have that extra piece and that extra veteran leadership with some of those younger guys coming up. So I think it's a great move all around for Pittsburgh. Like I said, keeping pace with everything else that's going on in the Metro. I think the Penguins have done a good job.
All right, Andrew, what do you think about Pittsburgh? I like what they did. How about you?
Definitely. It's kind of the exact same thing. I mean, this is an opportunity where you think about the rich getting richer. It's one of those things. I mean, first of all, I had a friend that's a diehard Pittsburgh fan, and I hate to joke about this, but he's pretty much saying, does Jim Rutherford have memory problems right now? Does he think it's 2015? Because that's pretty much, picking up Connor Sheary again and what he's developing right now with this Penguins team really seems to me like the exact same team they're trying to build when they were doing their little back-to-back Stanley Cup run there. Is just unbelievable depth from point A to point Z, it seems like. I'm curious, guys, how big of an impact Patrick Marleau will be. I can't wait to watch. I'll be watching out for the first few games that he plays for the Penguins to see exactly what type of impact he makes. But looking at this lineup now, guys, I mean, first of all, how big of an impact has Jason Zucker been since he got there? I mean, that's a guy already that's been so great for them. Now picking up a few guys down the depth chart. They've got some solid goaltending. I think they've done just great. They didn't try to force too many things, but they picked up a few key pieces. It's a 200-foot game. That means the most to me about this Pittsburgh Penguins team than anything. Getting guys that are not only going to be good in the offensive zone, but are going to be able to play at both ends of the rink. That means the most to me there. I think this team is bound for a pretty good run here, honestly, and we'll see how it goes. But looking at what they did here at the deadline, I've got to be impressed with it. And it's kind of like the Oilers. They're different types of teams, but they didn't add, your top line guy. They just added a few guys to the second and third line.
Yeah, definitely. Good question from Carlo in the chat. Is sitting out a few days betting the NHL while we recalibrate on teams with major activity advisable? It's not the worst thing in the world at all. Don't just jump in there tomorrow night, and we're going to have a big card on the Ice Guys show tomorrow to break down. Don't just fly in there and bet 10 games. You don't necessarily have to do that. Pick your spots. Let's see what these, there's got to be cohesion with these players that arrive at new teams. It has to develop. It's not going to be something that happens at the snap of a finger or overnight. So taking it easy, being a little bit more conservative from a betting perspective in terms of volume of wagers. First couple nights as teams play their first game or even two following the deadline with all these new players on the in the lineup, it's definitely not a bad way to go, without a doubt.
Yeah, and one thing that's interesting is the fact, because there's only one game tonight, I think this is probably the first time in a long time where we'll see most of the players traded actually be, at least with their teams, their new teams, in the first night. Whether they suit up or not is a different story. But in recent years, the schedule's kind of chopped up like usual, and it takes guys 2 or 3 days before they get acclimated into the lineup at all just to play. Let alone, like I said, then adjusting with their line mates and different things of that nature. So yeah, so waiting. Yeah, I would advise to do that as well, because I'm passing on tonight's game, which we'll talk about later. But like I said, yeah, you want to just kind of wait and let things settle in a little bit. Like I said, it's really not a bad idea. Also, breaking with that Robin Lehner deal going to Vegas, Hawks are getting back a second-round pick, a prospect, and goalie Malcolm Subban. So as we're talking about betting, the overs for the Hawks when Malcolm Subban's in net, it's going to be a dumpster fire.
Well, exactly. He's not even got as good a defense in front of him now in Chicago, like he did in Vegas. So you talk about, and he had a defense with Alec Martinez now on it last night. We obviously saw. Now it wasn't all Subban's fault last night against Anaheim, but it's not been a great season for him. He's not had consistency. He's not been able to shut the door when he's had these opportunities to get the net as a starter this year with the Golden Knights. And now you got a much weaker defense in front of you now going to Chicago. So it makes a lot of sense that
given
Red Light's going to be lit up a lot.
He's given up 4 or more goals in his last 5 starts. So you add that with a Hawks defense that, by the way, also now missing Erik Gustafsson as he's been sent to Calgary. We're probably going to see 6.5s and 7s down the stretch whenever Subban's confirmed in net.
Yeah, exactly. It's a question of, can their offense help out with these overs? Because again, their offense, Chicago's kind of dried up the last few games, and their power play's just been pathetic. I mean, and nobody knows that more than Alex B. Smith. But definitely Subban going to Chicago with that patchwork blue line in front of him could be a recipe for over. Speaking of recipe for overs, one last thing on Pittsburgh. With the depth on their team, I think they'll play more overs. And I think Mike Sullivan is going to be a coach that's going to say, you know what, when we had all the injuries, we really tried to clamp down defensive play, low scoring. Well, he's got the horses in the stable now with this lineup the way it is right now. With all the forwards and the depth they've got there, they can get back to playing a little bit more, pedal to the metal, high octane type hockey. You might see that moving forward with the Pittsburgh Penguins with these moves. And from a props perspective, and I know Andrew's been doing a lot with the props lately, player points, goal scoring props, power play goals. I want to mention the power play props with Pittsburgh moving forward. They're going to be good bets. You can put 2 legitimately awesome power play units together now with this lineup. If you're the Pittsburgh Penguins, with all the depth at your disposal from a forward group, you can have 2. You can have a second power play group that's almost as good as your first top power play unit now for Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh Penguin games over the power play goal prop in their games makes a hell of a lot of sense to me moving forward coming out of this trade deadline.
Yeah, definitely. And I like the when live betting, something I look at a lot is next goal scored. If you can move quickly with that, and I've done that a lot quite with Pittsburgh, actually, betting on them to score next as soon as there's a penalty committed. So that's something, like you said, that's another way to attack looking at teams that have bolstered their power play or going against a team with a weaker penalty kill.
And usually that number is 1.5 for the power play goals, and usually it's a plus price for a lot of games. So, and to quote what Ian always says about games like that as well, looking at aggressiveness, a rivalry game with a lot more penalties ensue and scrums and hard hits, things like that. You can definitely handicap that into looking at more penalties as well. We talk about guys' physicality being an aspect come playoffs. Look what happened to the Flames last year in the playoffs first round. Look what happened to the Tampa Bay Lightning in the first round last year. I'm a big advocate of having skill, but and you guys know all I talk about is depth, and everybody knows that that's obviously important. But how important is it the Bruins pick up Ritchie, trade away Heinen, pick up Ritchie? That's a guy, if they go against the Leafs in the first round, the toughness and the skill is just unmatched. It's just unbelievable. This team knows how to make those small moves that are so impactful. I tweeted that out earlier, and I truly believe that. I mean, if you're a Bruins fan, you have to be extremely happy with the way that your general manager is managing your team on a year-to-year basis, because they're not just living and dying by the past line, the top line. They're just juggling around the rest of the 3 lines and finding a way for it to fit. Let's talk about a guy like Jake DeBrusk. I think he's kind of an unsung hero for this team, a guy that when he's playing well, the team's playing well. They've got a great 3 defensive pairings, But getting a guy like Richie that just adds that level of toughness to this team that can still play, pretty solid hockey offensively, I think that's a big pickup for the Bruins.
Yeah, Bruins were under the radar. I was no question about it. They weren't as splashy with the moves as some other teams, but I like what they did. It's all about getting a little bit more depth here and there. Nick Ritchie does that. He's going to fit in so well with the Bruins, and the fan base is going to love him because he's got that physical element to him, and he's had a better offensive season than a lot of people think. And that was with a poor Anaheim Ducks team. 8 goals, 11 assists for a guy that plays, the limited amount of minutes and the lower amount of ice time he gets. It's not bad at all. You're going to a Boston team now, and they've already added Andre Kasha, which I like quite a bit, to improve their offensive depth. So the Bruins did good work as well. The team that I definitely wanted to talk about on this trade deadline show, because they were very active today, the Carolina Hurricanes. We know all the moves they were essentially a team that, after what happened Saturday night, Mrazek injured, concussion. Who knows how long that's going to be when you're dealing with that kind of injury. James Reimer injured against Toronto on Saturday, long term. That's why they had to call upon David Ayers, the emergency goalie, Saturday night against the Leafs. So you're both of your starting top 2 goalies out of action, possibly long term. Brett Pesce, who's been one of your best defensemen this year, he's out, and you were already missing Dougie Hamilton. So all of a sudden, you had the Hurricanes just gutted at goaltender, gutted on defense on the blue line. You had to see this team take action, and they did that today. They pick up Brady Shea in the last hour from the New York Rangers, which I thought was a very necessary and solid move. They pick up Sami Vatanen from the New Jersey Devils, 2 good defensemen, two defensemen that can go in there, get and play big minutes and not be fazed by it. They're guys that can play minutes and are used to it. So that's going to help Rod Brindamore's team. These are not only are they 2 badly needed type of acquisitions for the Carolina Hurricanes, they're defensemen who can come in there and play at a relatively good level and at least keep this Carolina playoff ship storm surge afloat while they try to make the playoffs until they get some of these injuries back. The problem is goalie for the Carolina Hurricanes is that they have been trying to address that, and I'm not sure if they have. I have not heard any move that the Carolina Hurricanes have made to address their goaltending position, but as of right now, they have not yet made a deal. Unless there's one announced in the next 20 minutes, they have not made a deal for a goaltender. And now in the short term, Reimer's gone for a long time. Mrazek could be back in a couple days. He still could be out a month from now because concussions, you just never know. They are dicey, high variance type of injuries when it comes to how long the absence is. So you could be going to war nightly with goaltending from Anton Forsberg, who's been up and down NHL to AHL forever, and Alex Nedeljkovic, who has actually had a decent season in the AHL, 2.51 goals against, 905 save percentage, but still is the guys you can trust. Same with Forsberg, right around the same mark, 2.95 goals against, 905 save percentage. Nedeljkovic has had a couple of starts here and there in the NHL, not been overly impressive, and Forsberg has never been impressive anytime he's been in the NHL in the past. That's your concern. If you've got to ride with Forsberg and Nedeljkovic long-term and you don't get Mrazek back anytime soon, I don't know if there's any defense that can make up for that.
Well, I think with Nedeljkovic, you look, this is a team that he won the Calder Cup last year and pretty much carried them throughout. I remember watching that final series against the Wolves. He's a decent goalie. He's their goalie of the future.
Checkers, yep.
Yeah, so he's a guy, I think I wouldn't be too worried. Like I said, obviously you don't want him and Forsberg moving down the stretch. Forsberg, a fringe AHL guy at best. But like I said, if you can get Mrazek back, I think Nedeljkovic being the backup is not the worst case scenario. Obviously, you would have liked to have seen them go out and get somebody. But like I said, the goalie train kind of being thrown off with what happened with New York. That trickled down. I think that really affected Carolina, like I said, like it did with Colorado and a couple other teams. So, like I said, they just got to roll with what they got. But I don't think it's the worst of options, to be honest.
Yeah, you know what, Matt Wetzel, Devil's got a bag of chips and a beer for Simmons. You know what, I don't like if you talk about thumbs down, I'm not sure the Devils got enough for who they traded. I don't know if they got enough for Vatanen. I don't know if they got enough for Simmons. This is a Devils team that's now in a full-blown rebuild, and I'm not sure they got a great return for anybody they traded today. Not as good as I think they could have gotten anyway. So I'm a little disappointed with what New Jersey did. And New Jersey's how things change, guys. We talk about New Jersey maybe contending for playoffs and beyond in the East coming into the season, and now they're in a rebuild again. And this could be a long and painful rebuild from the stretch from the looks of it. I wasn't enamored with any of the returns the New Jersey got for the players they traded away today, and that's unfortunately very disappointing. Andrew, we were talking about Carolina as you were away for a minute or two there. Carolina Hurricanes, I like the Shea and Vatanen trades. I'm a little bit shaky with maybe having to go with Forsberg and Nedeljkovic as your goalies until you get Reimer and or Mrazek back, although Alex made an interesting case that Nedeljkovic was phenomenal in the AHL last year, leading that team to the Calder Cup. The question is, can he do it at the NHL level? But there is some ability there. What's your thoughts on what Carolina's done? Obviously, they were forced basically to be a big time active team in the trade market today based on what happened Saturday.
Yeah, I was hoping they would sign a Zamboni driver, but that never ended up happening. No, but obviously it's really weird. Not only when one of your goaltenders goes down, but two of them. It makes for kind of a wild time, especially around trade deadline. This is a team that I think the same way that Ian was betting overs with Columbus, and I hop in that as well, with Seth Jones being down and countless injuries, not just Seth Jones. This is a team you might want to look at betting overs as well, because we're going to continue to see a 5.5 goal total with this team, with goalie injuries, with a couple of injuries still with Dougie Hamilton out. I feel like we'll start seeing consistent overs with the Carolina Hurricanes, and a couple of decent moves with them at the deadline. Again, nothing too crazy though. So it's a matter of, they're going to have to play a low scoring style come playoff time. But for now, with some sloppiness we've seen from them recently, Can that scoring depth be enough for them? Is it enough against some of these teams? I haven't been able to look at it here. There's schedule down the stretch, but I'll be curious to see if this team does not fall off. I think they will actually, guys, over the next maybe 4 or 5 games, fall off a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, Carolina's a wait and see for me. I think you just can't integrate this much change. Two top goalies, one of your best defensemen in Pesce, all out for at least for a little bit. In the case of Mrazek, it's long-term for Reimer and Pesce. And then integrate Shea and Vatanen onto the defense core and expect things are going to be clicking right away. You've got to give them that minute or two to see what they look like. I think in the short term, you're right. Overs could be on the menu for Carolina. These first few games, we've got to see what Forsberg and or Nedeljkovic can do. Probably more interested in overs with Forsberg than Nedeljkovic, because there's probably a little bit more upside with Nedeljkovic in terms of long-term potential and ceiling in the National Hockey League. But yes, just in general, looking at overs with Carolina may not be a bad way to go.
I just had somebody tweet at me that they're not excited to have Robin Leonard versus Malcolm Subban. I'm not sure where that's coming from, but that's going to be an outstanding 1-2 punch of a goaltender.
Yeah, absolutely.
And with Leonard, like, we'll be honest, and I don't want to make light of it, because obviously when you struggle with mental health, it's serious issues, and Robin Leonard's had that. And, sometimes he can go into depression states, and woe is me, and, I don't like the situation here in Chicago, and I think that's been eating at him the last few weeks as his plays declined a little bit, because he sees a team going nowhere, hideous defense in front of him, probably not making the playoffs. He's thinking, man, things aren't going well. And when you're sometimes, when bad things and things that you're not enjoying happen to you, it hits you harder when you're struggling with your own mental health. That's the way it is. So now he gets to Vegas, clean slate, probably puts him in a happier place, which is important for a guy that struggled with that kind of thing in the past, motivated, happy again, excited. And I think you get him playing well. And who on earth doesn't think he has the chance to be better than Malcolm Subban? I have no idea who the hell would think that, but I agree. It is a very, very good. And finally, Fleury, I think, can get some rest down the stretch, because Fleury, let's be honest, he's played a shit ton of games in his career. He's in his mid-30s now. He's played a lot of games this year as well, although I think being away from the team when his dad passed away has helped that a little bit in terms of his workload. But still, this is a guy you wouldn't mind resting for a game or two. I know Gerard Gallant took this tact with Fleury last year, tried to rest him as much as possible when it made sense down the stretch. I think Peter DeBoer will probably do the same thing with Fleury, because now you got a Robin Leonard who's capable of going in there and playing well for you in net. I think it's a great move.
Yeah, it's an awesome move for Vegas, a terrible move for Chicago. And as I'm reading now, they're saying that there's reports that Robin Leonard was actually going to offer up signing for less money with the Hawks on a 3-year deal, and Stan Bowman didn't counter with anything. So I don't understand why on earth you would just let this guy, who was a Vezina Trophy finalist, who's been the MVP of this team, basically just walk for a backup AHL goalie and a 2nd-round pick. The Hawks are definitely giant losers today at the deadline, and even getting only conditional picks with Gustafson, it's just the shit show continues with Stan Bowman. And at this point, I talked about how Colin needs to be out. I think we might need to be looking at possibly getting another general manager in there as well, because that's just unacceptable. This is a guy he's the number one goalie. He's the guy who we talk about Fleury getting rest. He could actually possibly steal the spot from Fleury and be the number one guy going in if he gets hot going into the playoffs. The way that the way that everything's shaking out in the Pacific, they're just a few wins, a few points from possibly getting a home ice spot. So. This is a huge win for Vegas, but this just shows you the ineptitude of things that are happening over on the west side of Chicago.
Yeah, you're right. And it's one of those situations where, Blackhawk fans that have been with the team forever, they'll be forever in debt and thankful to and happy. And thank you very much to Stan Bowman for putting the Cup team together and the dynasty together that this team enjoyed throughout the large part of the year.
Dale Talon.
And Dale Talon as well. Yeah, well, Dale Talon. Some would argue even more of an impact and fingerprint all over it. But now you're just not getting the return that you should be getting for some of these guys. Same with New Jersey, Chicago, and New Jersey. You got to get more if you're going to be full on dive in head first in a rebuild scenario. You've got to get more for the guys that you've traded today than you have, or else you're going to be spinning wheels and mired in mediocrity and basement dwelling for years. And I think the Devils and Blackhawks are both well on their way.
Yeah, and you got to at least if you're gonna make a deal and not get much return, then at least dump some cash. Work with the cap. They didn't even do that. I mean, they basically traded guys who were going to be gone at the end of the year anyway. So it's just a complete loss. Where at least you have a team like Minnesota. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the show that they were trying to move Parise to the Islanders for Andrew Ladd. That deal
it fell through.
It fell through. But kudos to Bill Guerin for trying to move what's easily one of the worst contracts in the league. And having that go all the way until the 23rd hour. So, when you got GMs that are actively trying to correct some of the wrongs that either they've done or their predecessors have done, that's something you want to see. We're not seeing that from the Hawks right now.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to you need to fill up the cupboard, because when you're a rebuilding team, cupboard's bare. You need picks, you need prospects, you need bushelfuls of both. And I didn't see enough of that from both the Devils and or the Blackhawks today. I'll say this about the Flyers quickly, and then we'll get to the Islanders, because they're a team worth talking about, because I think they did some good things today with getting J.G. Pageau. Philadelphia, I'm getting more interested in them a little bit from a team that could not only make the playoffs, but maybe be dangerous. I don't know about make a long run, be this year's Carolina. Someone has the potential to be this year's Carolina. A team that comes out of nowhere and maybe can get to a conference finals like the Hurricanes did. Why not the Flyers at this point? Because they're starting to win on the road, which is good. Their road games are getting better. That's a good sign. Their road play is getting better, as is Carter Hart's road play. Their top forwards have been great lately. Giroux, Voracek, Couturier's had an amazing season for the Philadelphia Flyers. Konechny's been excellent. And now they get a couple of depth forwards. Nate Thompson's a good player, I think, for playoff time. Really good player for playoff time for the Philadelphia Flyers. They get Derek Grant as well from the Anaheim Ducks, another good playoff type guy who's got a little offense to him. Same with Thompson. Good additions. That's what I wanted the Flyers to do, either get a depth defenseman or get some depth forwards. I don't think they did much with the defense, but they at least got a couple depth forwards that I really like those moves. I was worried about depth of forwards for the Flyers going into this deadline. They've addressed that a little bit with those moves. They're minor moves compared to what other teams have done, but they're going to help this Flyers team. I'm liking more and more what I see from Philadelphia, truly. This team's starting to really play some good hockey. Not saying they would beat Penguins or Capitals, who they'd probably have to see in a first-round series, but would they be a tough out? Would they maybe give them a series, give them a go? Absolutely they would, I think, with the way they're trending. So I've got the Flyers a little bet on, coming out of this trade deadline. So like what I see right now from Philadelphia. Any thoughts from you guys on the Flyers? Then we'll talk a little Islanders hockey.
I think Philadelphia's a bet on team moving forwards. Absolutely. They're a team that I never really was loving betting on them. But the fact is, since it is a betting show, we're getting great prices with this team still. Yeah, I saw a -130 the other day, -140 against some subpar teams at home for this Philadelphia Flyers team. This is a bet on team moving forward. It's picked up a few good pieces. I think this is a team that you want to look towards betting on moving forward. I think the mistake a lot of people make is taking into their handicapping too much of the whole playoff race. I think it's about a game-by-game handicap still. Obviously, I factor in which games mean more than others, but you can't be handicapping the rest of the season based off a must-win game Because like Ian always says, it doesn't always mean we'll win. And I think that's people get really caught up in that.
Absolutely, no question about that. So it's going to be interesting to see, how that affects the Flyers. I think those depth forward additions, though, are good. Speaking of additions, J.G. Pajot being a member of the New York Islanders is nothing but great for this hockey team. This is the one. What's the Achilles heel all season long? It's been what we've always been concerned about with the Islanders. There's not a lot of teams where you can say, especially teams that are in the playoff chase, do you have enough offense? Pittsburgh should have enough offense. Washington should have enough offense. Tampa Bay should have enough offense. Even Boston, with the moves they've had, they should have enough offense now, especially with one of the best top lines, if not the best in hockey. The New York Islanders, not so much. They're a team that's sometimes crying out for more offense because it's really reliant on Brock Nelson, Barzal, Beauvillier, those forwards, and there's a huge drop-off. Well, now you get in J.G. Pajot, who's having the best offensive season of his career, 20-plus goal scorer, high energy, great work ethic, great effort every night. Even with a bad Ottawa team, that guy never took a night off this year. Played great, made an impact offensively, and now he's with the New York Islanders. Great addition for them, especially now because their offense has kind of went back in the tank. The last couple of weeks, they've struggled to score goals again, the Islanders. Getting J.G. Pajot, great move by the New York Islanders. Maybe a sneaky over team in the short term just because they may make this addition. They are still going to be 5.5 game in and game out. Find those spots, maybe a little value to look over the total a little bit more again with the Islanders getting Pajot. It certainly lengthens and deepens their lineup up front at the forward position, getting him from the Senators. Alex, what's your thoughts on what the Islanders have done?
Yeah, not only is that a great move, just picking him up in this acquisition, but then they signed him for another 6 years as well. So to wrap him up long term, like I said, that's just huge for them moving forward, even if things don't pan out in this postseason. So that's something that, and we haven't seen that from the Islanders in a while, really just making a whole lot of big moves. Obviously a lot of the fans are still mad about how the way things ended with John Tavares and so forth. So this is kind of something that they can, positive energy moving forward with that franchise.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. We thought for a minute, actually, it was not only J.G. Pajot going there, but Zach Parise as well. But that deal did not get done before the deadline. It fell through. They were talking big time about it with Minnesota, but
it was hyped up so much like it already happened.
Exactly. They had Bruce Boudreau on the Sportsnet coverage today talking about how, his memories of Zach Parise coaching him in Minnesota the last few years, and almost like it's already a done deal, fait accompli. And unfortunately, now we find out, nope. No deal, no dice.
Yeah, and apparently they had been working on it for quite a while. I mean, they've been working on moving, trying to find someone to move Parise since the summer. But this particular deal, they, from what I was reading, had been worked on in the last couple of weeks. They're trying to figure out logistics as far as, like I said, obviously the cap, who would retain certain salary, what prospects would be thrown in as well. So I think that was what led to the breakdown of that deal.
Yeah, another good point, Carlo. Yes, Pajot will help. Specialty, he plays on both PK as well. You're right, Cizikas and Clutterbuck. The reason why the Islanders have struggled a little bit more defensively lately, Cizikas, defensive, great away from the puck. Same with Clutterbuck. And, of course, Adam Pelech, one of their more underrated shutdown defensemen, has been out for a long time, too. And that's really where you can trace back some more of these Islanders' struggles defensively. And, obviously, the offense has had a tough time of it. So, very interesting.
It's tough to tell, though, if it'll make an immediate impact with Jean-Gabriel Pajot or not.
Yes.
I find sometimes when a player comes from a really, really piss-poor team to a really solid team, it's either they're going to come on right away and be like, sweet, I'm out of that team, I get to go to a better team now, or it's going to be a slow process here where maybe Pajot guys looked good on that team because they were bad. Was he ever on that team when they were good?
That's the big question, right?
If you stick him on a good team now, how much of an impact will he make?
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. I'm still looking. It doesn't look like I've heard anything new in terms of new trades the last few games or last few.
I'm seeing one with Daniel Sprong getting sent from Anaheim to Washington. I'm trying to see who's coming.
Wow, that's a good. I'm telling you guys, I watched him play junior. I watched him play for 2 different teams in the Quebec League. He's going to be good, and give him a few years to develop it. That's another sniper on the Washington Capitals. That's a guy that can shoot the puck. He's not really the big 200-foot player, but he's another guy that can absolutely shoot the puck.
By the way, Doug Wilson, I've criticized the guy. He got a first-round pick for Barclay Goodrow from Tampa Bay. So give him credit for that. And I was hoping he'd at least get a second. The fact he got a first from Tampa for Goodrow, that's good job, Doug Wilson. Okay, one guy at least finally getting a little something in terms of return for rebuilding, I should say, for the future in San Jose. I can't say the same for New Jersey. I can't believe New Jersey and Chicago today, what they've gotten back for what they traded away. Can't believe it. Like, it's basically a bag of pucks. It's basically a cheeseburger at McDonald's. It's essentially what you got back. Something that cheap. That's about it for the Blackhawks and Devils for the assets they traded away.
And with the Hawks, I mean, as far as looking from a betting perspective, maybe they come out a little bit sharper because a lot of guys were worried about getting moved, and now that they're staying put, so having that to rest, that could lend a little bit of energy. But like I said, it's obviously going to be. I'm anticipating the absolute worst with Subban and like I said, in this defense, and obviously this will be the time to let some of the younger guys shine. And I don't know what will happen now if. Let's say Subban falters. Will Colin Delia finally come back up from Rockford? We'll see what happens to him, because Delia is the guy who with the longest contract now of any of the goalies in the Hawks organization. They signed him. He's still got another 2 years on his contract. So it seems like, obviously, with Crawford more than likely going to be gone as an unrestricted free agent at the summer, that Delia would be the guy of the future as of now. So that maybe we'll see that happen. But as far as like I said, the Hawks moving forward, hopefully they may make a lot of splashes and do a lot of things this offseason, because like I said, it's been a very disappointing day today.
Yeah, absolutely. And flabbergasted is the best word for it, for the return that Chicago and New Jersey in particular got today for the players that they dealt away. Dallas pretty much stays just about stands pat. I know they were linked to Joe Thornton for a bit, who of course stays in San Jose. A couple at St. Louis doesn't do a whole lot, which you wouldn't expect St. Louis to be active today. They've already got a pretty damn good hockey team as it is. It could be rounding into form. They drill Dallas, they drill Minnesota, back-to-back games, their last two, both on the road. Look out, Blues trying to maybe flip that switch again, saying, you want the Stanley Cup, come get it. Maybe the Blues are trying to say warn teams of that right now. But the question is, do they have enough in their physical and mental gas tank to go to June again, like they did last year?
Yeah.
That's going to be the big key for the defending Stanley Cup champions. Vegas made some nice moves. Martinez, of course, big-time addition to the blue line. And now Leonard to finally solve this unsteady backup scenario behind Marc-Andre Fleury. So good moves by them. Pittsburgh, Washington, good. Even getting Washington, getting Kovalchuk. We have to talk about that, Kovalchuk. You think Kovalchuk was excited to go to Montreal, and he's disappointed to kind of leave Montreal because he enjoyed it there. But now you're going to go to Team Russia, essentially, with Ovi and Kuznetsov and all these guys in Washington, and have a chance to win a Stanley Cup. I mean, as disappointed as he would be to leave Montreal, he's probably going to the one place where he'd be just as excited, if not more than disappointed, leaving Montreal to be excited going to Washington with a chance with Ovi and winning a Stanley Cup. So watch Kovalchuk. He brought an effort, revitalized, going to a team that he was excited to play for in Montreal. He'll be just as excited going to Washington, I think, and I think he'll play well for them.
Yeah, one team that was actually surprisingly quiet was the Arizona Coyotes. I thought they would try to do more, especially we were talking about goaltending, talking about the injury issues that they've had with both of their goalies. You think they would try to look for something depth-wise there, but nothing really at all with Arizona.
Yeah, I think Georgiev was the number one target for so many of these teams needing some goaltending help. And Leonard obviously gets dealt to Vegas, so maybe he was out there too. But Georgiev was the number one target. Once the Rangers took him off the trade board with signing Kreider, wanting to make a run at the playoffs, I think that took Carolina's ambitions to get a goalie out the window. That threw Arizona's ambitions to maybe trade for a goalie out to Colorado, another team that maybe could have traded for a Georgiev as well. I think he was the main guy on the trade board today that some teams were looking at to bolster and shore up their goaltending depth. And I think that decision by the Rangers to keep Georgiev, for obvious reasons, torpedoed a lot of teams' aspirations that were looking for goalie help.
That's a weird scenario there, I think, with the New York Rangers. I mean, this is a team that, like Alex talked about, I actually just found out about that 2 hours ago, watching that little update video from the management team. But it's one of those really sad situations. You hear about how well he was playing. I mean, like, unbelievable record, unbelievable goals against average. Now Shesterkin goes down. Yeah. And signed to a 7-year deal. This could, I hate to say it, guys, but I'm betting against this team without Shesterkin between the pipes.
Yeah,
I'm betting under with him in the net, and I'm betting over when he's not in the net.
He's made that much of a difference. Georgiev's been good, but he's not been Shesterkin good. And because Shesterkin's been on a ridiculous level. They were getting outshot 23-4 by the lowly San Jose Sharks of all teams the other night when they played San Jose on that tough back-to-back because they played in Carolina the night before. And he's the only reason it was 1-1 after the first period. He was amazing. 23-4 and you're 1-1. Talk about a victory.
Yeah.
So
and another thing too, looking like I said, because Brady Shea now being moved as well, so definitely might be looking at over, especially with Lundqvist gets back in. Wonder how rusty is he going to be? Sitting out. They said obviously, he's going to be ready, of course, and he's a gamer, but we just haven't seen the best of him lately. And so now having to be thrown back in the spot, does it revitalize him, or do we just see him kind of just still be kind of the same old over the hill goalie that we've seen all season?
Yeah, exactly. So that's going to be and Lundqvist, what a tough spot for him. He's going to have to all of a sudden be ready to play, because now it's him and Georgiev for the next couple of weeks. And this is a guy that hasn't played in forever. He's basically been in his own little world, with Georgiev and Shesterkin getting all the starts the last, couple of weeks. He's all of a sudden got to get mentally and physically ready to play again. At his age, with as much downtime as he's had without starting and the struggles he's had this year, that's a chore. That is a challenge and a half for Henrik Lundqvist to get himself suddenly geared up mentally and physically enough to be ready to go and play at a high level when he's called upon by David Quinn to start on any given night. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how this whole scenario plays out. But it's hard to tell your fan base when you're 4 points out, regardless of the Shesterkin-Buchnevich car accident last night, 4 points out, we're not going for it. We're not going to try to make the playoffs. We're 14-6 our last 20 games and playing our best hockey. But as to Andrew's point, a lot of that 14-6 thanks to Shesterkin, and now you're not going to see him for the next couple of weeks. So fascinating to see how that goes. Let's get you guys your final thoughts on the trade day overall. Then we'll talk Ottawa-Columbus, and then we'll wrap up the show. Alex, final thoughts on what we saw today?
Well, like I said, a lot of teams making some great moves, and this has been one of the, like I said, the more interesting and fun deadline days over the last recent years, and I'd be excited to see, like I said, how that race turns out, not just in the Pacific, but also in the Metropolitan. There's a lot of teams that have a lot of firepower now, and it's going to be an absolute dogfight all the way to the very end. So just absolutely looking forward to seeing what pans out, and it's great that we got, nearly every team in action tomorrow night to, finally see where things start.
Yeah, to me, the Metro and the Pacific divisions are going to be absolutely on fire for the last couple months of the season. The Pacific is anybody's division, and now the Metro is as deep a division now as any in the NHL. And hey, the Central Division battle is still pretty damn good too, with St. Louis, Dallas, and Colorado all pretty close together in that division. So the key going out of the deadline is not only the moves that we've talked about, but how exciting 3 of these divisional races are truly going to be.
For sure.
Metro, Pacific, and Central. Must-watch TV, I think, in terms of the NHL world for the next couple months. Andrew, your overall final thoughts and takeaways from trade deadline day?
Yeah, just to continue your thought, some of these playoff races and divisional races is unbelievable. You look at the Atlantic, Tampa and Boston at the top of those divisions, but other than that, Pacific is looking tough. It's unbelievable to look at some of these. The next 2 weeks are going to decide a lot, and I know that sounds so amateur really for just 2 weeks, but it's really going to tell us the difference after the deadline of what direction some of these teams are really going to go in. And I just want to reiterate the fact that although we didn't see any massive names get moved around, some of these key pieces going to some teams really go to show what good general managers are and what bad general managers are. And I think, a general manager like Rutherford for Pittsburgh has done an absolutely outstanding job. And I think that'll really help that team moving forwards. I look forward to seeing Edmonton's offense progress with some secondary scoring being added to them. Interested to see how Carolina looks over the next little while, and really interested to see how Jean-Gabriel Pageau turns out as not New York Islander. So, after this, I'm going to prepare for a podcast I'm on for talking tomorrow's games, and then I got to pretty much dive in and literally get ready to look at where every single player went and how it's going to adjust my power rankings on each team. Because the prices, guys, for everybody out there watching, the prices are what you have to watch out for. I'm not a big value guy, but for example, we saw it, I think it was last night or 2 nights ago, the Vegas flu. We got a great price there with the Arizona Coyotes at like a plus 150 price. You guys had them on your card. Value is going to be the biggest thing to look for over the next week or two. Finding teams that shouldn't be priced at, minus 140 and they're looking at around minus 120. That's something you want to really be betting on.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely something you want to keep in mind is, how the trade deadline moves and acquisitions, as Andrew said, how it impacts the pricing game in and game out with the teams coming out of the deadline. That's definitely one of the things. Has there been an adjustment made, or is there not so much of one? That's going to be something to watch for moving forward. I know Andrew's got to run, so I'll let him talk on the one Monday night game in the NHL before anyone else. Ottawa and Columbus. We've got Columbus minus 215. Minus 225 home favorites, total 5.5 shade to the over. I'm not going to be long-winded with my analysis. I do have a bet, actually, an official play on this game. It's just simple. Columbus overs have treated me well, game in and game out, including Saturday against Nashville. I'm just going with it again, over 5.5 minus 115, with some reservation because I don't know who's going to put the puck in the net now for Ottawa.
Exactly.
They traded Pajot. That's definitely a concern I have. And there's some talk Korpisalo's coming back, ready to make his return tonight. Maybe, maybe not. They haven't announced it for sure yet. It might be Merzlikins again. It might be Korpisalo. And even if it is Korpisalo, talking about rusty goalie, been out forever, 2 months. Is he going to be sharp that first game back? And Columbus is still scoring. I don't know how, with Bjorkstrand out now and still so many forwards out, but they are scoring. They scored, against Nashville the other night. They've scored goals a couple of games during this run. Their defense, as I've mentioned, without Seth Jones, has dropped off significantly. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Ottawa, Columbus over 5.5 minus 115. Andrew, anything for you? Sens Jackets, the one game on the card.
Yeah, I like the over at first, and I honestly started off the day by looking at plus 1.5 goals for the Ottawa Senators, and that was strictly based off the price we were getting with it, and I thought that Columbus was overpriced, but the more I thought about it, I hate changing plays, but when I finalized my card, I looked at Columbus puck line, and that might sound kind of crazy for a team that's, I'm pretty sure, 2-8 their last 10 or something like that. This is just a team that's in way better, they're in a playoff race. I think they have more scorers. They're in a better position right now. And this Ottawa Senators team is thinking for the future. They're thinking for 4 or 5 years down the road right now. They're in trade deadline mode. I get it. There could be a few guys that are going to step up for the Ottawa Senators. But I think this is a game that Columbus can't take lightly, and they won't take lightly. And I've talked about it, how a couple teams will take your Ottawas of the world, your Detroit Red Wings of the world lightly. And I just don't see Columbus taking this team lightly tonight. We saw Ottawa ship off a few guys today, and it's only going to get worse for them as they get younger and younger and probably closer to the end of the season, call up some younger guys from the AHL. They've got talent, but, they're looking like a junior team right now with some of these younger guys. I mean, their average age of this team is probably my age, so this is one of those things that you have to look at it and take the team that's hungrier and in a playoff hunt versus a team that's tanking and getting ready for the next few years. I think, they're one of those teams that's just cheering on to win Lafreniere, not win the Stanley Cup.
Absolutely. So you're just
puck line
official. All right, Columbus puck line official.
I'll see you guys later.
Andrew. All right, there we go. Andrew's got to run. Andrew, thanks. We'll see you tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern. Big Tuesday card. See you then.
See you.
All right, good stuff. Andrew McGinnis with us. All right, Alex, what's your thoughts here? Ottawa and Columbus. Any?
I got nothing. I mean, I can't back this Columbus team that's lost 8 in a row. It makes total sense. I agree with everything Andrew says. It's a must-win game for them to stay afloat in this playoff race like we talked about. They've got Carolina and the Rangers breathing down their necks. And that's the thing we talked about with this race. For as tight as everything is, you have one bad week, you lose 3-4 games, you get into a rut, you can be out of it quickly. Especially with, there's still obviously teams in the Atlantic gunning for that wild card spot. So time's of the essence. They got to turn things around, and they need 2 points desperately tonight. So Columbus should win, but the price, I'm not going to back anything with it.
All right. Yeah, exactly. Still talking about a team on an 8-game losing streak coming into today, that being the Columbus Blue Jackets. Without Seth Jones, they've looked like a mess at times defensively. So it is a little bit of a leap of faith, even laying the goal and a half against a completely rebuilding Ottawa outfit that's trading away everybody and his brother today at the trade deadline. But I understand. I mean, as Columbus, it's a -1.5, +110 that's all the price is on the puck line, +110 with the Jackets to lay the goal and a half. So it would be a slight lean only for Alex. That is an official play for Andrew. Columbus puck line -1.5, +110. And then my official play on this game is Ottawa Columbus over 5.5, -115. Again, 4 straight overs for Columbus. 5 of their last 6 games have gone over the total. And again, all these totals have been 5.5 for Columbus. And it's still 5.5. It's clearing the over. I know Ottawa, where can they find offense? I got to hope that if they contribute to the scoreboard, we get something out of Bobby Ryan. We get something out of Brady Tkachuk. Duclair steps up, Connor Brown, and Nisimov. Those are the guys that are going to have to get it done offensively for Ottawa with all the trades of Ennis gone, Pajot gone. Marcus Hogberg, by the way, in net for Ottawa tonight, 3-14, 3.07 goals against, 908 save percentage. So he hasn't been great. So I do still think we can see some goals tonight in the Horseshoe State. Ottawa Columbus over 5.5 for me, -115. All right, that'll wrap up the show. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. By the way, no best bet for Andrew's bet or mine, just 1 unit play with our thoughts on the Sens and the Jackets. That'll wrap up the show. Thank you to everyone for tuning in for this free skate edition of the Ice Guys Trade Deadline Day recap show. I hope you enjoyed it. We gave all our thoughts on the big trades today, how these teams may look moving forward. Now we're looking to bet some of these teams moving forward as well. Thank you guys again. And again, if you enjoyed the content today on this show, and you're not currently a Patreon NHL Ice Guys subscriber, it's just $10 a month. We're here pretty much every single day, breaking down every single game. We'll be here tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern, for a massive, and I mean huge, NHL card. With only 1 game today on Trade Deadline Day, they're making up for it in a big way tomorrow. How about 13 games coming up on Tuesday? We'll be here at 3 p.m. Eastern time to break it down. If you're not a subscriber yet but want to be after what you saw today, $10 a month. Head over to patreon.com/iceguys for the best daily NHL hockey betting show on the web. Alex B. Smith, final words.
Yeah, like I said, tomorrow's gonna be a really fun day. It almost feels like a restart, a reboot to the season. The fact that you have so many games and all these different changing parts and stuff. So, like I said, the official push for the playoffs is on now, and it's gonna be an exciting run all the way through.
Time to target some futures, Ernesto. Right around now, I'll sprinkle on some on teams that I think made good. Islanders, sprinkle. Flyers, sprinkle. I can tell you right now, those 2 teams, I'm sprinkling a little something on both of them. Islanders and Flyers. You're getting better value. You're not getting value on Pittsburgh and Washington and teams like Tampa, teams like that anymore, even though they've improved too. I want the teams that are down the futures board that I think have made legitimate improvements. Islanders and Flyers in the East, maybe a little Edmonton Oilers in the West after what they've done as well.
Yeah, I would say Edmonton and even Vegas. I mean, obviously you won't get nearly as much value with Vegas, but I mean, like I said, adding a guy like Leonard, that's the best 1-2 punch of any teams that are contending for a playoff spot in really either conference right now. I mean, that's absolutely loaded. And their team that, they obviously have the horses to get all the way to the final. Would not be shocked if they do that again if both these guys stay healthy.
Definitely, no question. Vegas as well. Look, they're playing great right now. They're on a roll, and now Martinez and Leonard. That's a team that in that crazy Pacific Division race. The team that's hurt themselves today by staying quiet, and I'm worried about their overall play as well. Arizona, albeit they beat Tampa, and I did like them to beat Tampa Bay on Saturday night. I said that was a very, very bad spot for Tampa Bay. But is that just a one-off? Took advantage of the Lightning in their state after the winning streak got snapped, or is that a sign that Arizona's still got some good hockey down the stretch in them? We're about to find out, but it's simple. They should have already had the deals in place made to help them.
Yep.
Kessel in the offseason, Taylor Hall a few months ago. Those guys have to be big-time players. They haven't been yet this season for the Arizona Coyotes. They've got to show up, be big impact performers if they're going to make the playoffs. We'll see if they can down the stretch. There we go, folks. That's a wrap. We're done. We're out of here. For Alex B. Smith, for Andrew McGinnis, I'm Ian Cameron. Have a great Monday night. Thank you for watching the Free Skate edition. For all of you that are subscribers, we're back tomorrow, Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern, for a massive Tuesday NHL card right here on the Ice Guys. Have a great Monday night. Good luck with your wager.